I work on the ethnography of migration as a global social process, documenting the effects on the everyday in both new migrant sending areas in Latin America and new cosmopolitan receiving contexts in the global north. My research focuses on the effects of neoliberal globalization and transnational migration on the conditions of children's and youth's lives. I am currently examining how indigenous children's and youth experiences have been restructured in new migrant sending communities in rural Puebla in central Mexico. My work questions prevailing notions about what happens to children left behind and examines the cultural and social resources indigenous youth built upon in order to take the lead in transnational migration. My research sheds light on how particular global economic processes require key social actors, such as children and youth, and how the international migration of indigenous communities that until recently were engaged in subsistence agriculture has been increasingly shaped as a youth process. And this has deep implications for envisioning the future of indigenous education.
I specialize in archaeometry, a subfield of archaeology that focuses on the chemical and physical properties of artifacts, such as these ancient ceramics and stone tools. At the OSU reactor, I use a technique called neutron activation analysis to characterize the trace element signature of these artifacts, and then use the resulting data to determine where they were produced. Once we know their source, we can trace the movement of these goods and map out systems of trade and exchange. So for example, we're currently working on a puzzle called the Uruk expansion. And during the 4th millennium BC, southern Mesopotamian culture shows up rather suddenly at sites scattered throughout the surrounding Piedmont. So the question is, do vessels like these bevel rim bowls and droop spout jars represent a Mesopotamian trade network, or were they instead just local imitations of Mesopotamian goods? By examining the trace element composition of artifacts, we can gain important insights into the economy of ancient societies. Chemical analyses like these allow us to test models of market system development and evaluate the evidence for long-distance trade.
My research focuses on archaeological sites in Western North America that are 10,000 years old or more. I use many scientific methods to find, recover, and interpret information relating to artifacts, geologic deposits, and ancient environmental conditions. I am searching for the earliest archaeological evidence of humans in Western North America. By finding and studying early archaeological sites and the artifacts they contain, I aim to help understand how humans initially settled North, Central, and South America during the last ice age. My research takes me to wherever early archaeological sites can be found, from the Salmon River Canyon of western Idaho to the Oregon coast to the deserts of Baja California, Mexico. Figuring out when the first Americans arrived, where they came from, and how they lived in a world that was very much different than ours informs us about the last chapter of human global expansion. Knowing this provides a deeper appreciation of our success as a human species and adds important answers to the question of where did we come from.
My name is Melissa Cheney, and I'm a medical anthropologist focusing on maternal and infant health. I study midwifery and cross-cultural and evolutionary perspective, and my current focus is on normal physiologic birth research in the United States. The U.S. currently spends half of all the world's healthcare dollars, with one of the largest portions of that spending, $98 billion in fact, going toward maternity care. Even though we spend more than any other nation, we still rank toward the bottom for our maternal and infant health outcomes relative to other high-income nations. My research explores how midwives can be used to reduce costs, increase access to care for all women, and to improve outcomes. My work is motivated by a social justice agenda. We can't all be created equal if we can't get an equal start in life. Because so much of what we do in the United States tends to be exported to low-income nations, I and the graduate students who work with me in the Reproductive Health Lab here at OSU are trying to understand how we can create a system of maternity care that is sustainable and worth emulating.
I am currently doing Fulbright-funded research in Nador, Morocco on the impact of massive outmigration and return migration on Nador and its residents. Specifically, while here in Nador, I'm exploring about 5 things. The first one is the ways in which gender and generational relations have altered over the last 2 decades in the face of tightening of access to older male-dominated migrant destinations. Second thing I'm looking at is the impact of new communication technologies on migrant relations with the country of origin. Third thing I'm looking at is the relatively recent changes in the position of the Moroccan state towards its Amazigh, that is what we used to call Berber citizens. Fourth thing I'm looking at is the influence since the 1990s on Nadori migrants of the militarization of the Nador-Melilla border. And finally, I'm looking at the impact on Nador of returned migrants and remittances that have accumulated over the last quarter century. Morocco has been one of the most fertile intellectual field sites in all of anthropology and holds really a profoundly important place in the history of the discipline. A wide range of subjects continue to attract anthropologists to the country, and none really more so than the study of Moroccan migration, which has evolved in the last decades into arguably one of the most important subjects of investigation in the field of Middle East and North African social science research. Moroccan migration is, by any standards, among the most significant in the world in terms of the sheer numbers and the impact it has had on regions of origin. The investigation I'm undertaking of the influences of the constant circulation of goods and people into and out of Nador will provide hopefully a rich case study of the workings of the forces of transnationalism on a local scale. Such a study of the local ramifications of globalization on Morocco offers a distinct opportunity, I think, to contribute to ongoing broader global research and debates about the impact of transnational migration.
Currently, I'm analyzing the strategies that organic farmers in Japan, whose fields were showered by radiation from the Fukushima nuclear explosion, use to deal with the uncertainty caused by this catastrophe. Farmers thought their organic food was safer against risk than conventionally raised food, but now the government and public see organic food as riskier because it uses local inputs for compost and feed. So the big problem here deals with the question of how to cope with catastrophic uncertainty. The organic farmers take precautions, as by working with NGOs or nonprofits to measure the radiation in their crops. They also claim that organic soil locks up the radiation. Most interesting, they challenge themselves and their consumers to simply accept the fact that they live with radiation in their food and will continue to do so. Eat the radiation, as they say. Through this research, I'm contributing to the anthropology of uncertainty in crisis situations. When life goes beyond the point where you can calculate risk and make decisions, then how do people think and act? The Japan nuclear explosion gives a case that indicates that people do take precautions, but that a subversive group like organic farmers uses uncertainty in a productive way to further define their identity and lifestyle.
My work addresses three main questions. What role does culture play in shaping people's interactions with the natural environment? How do individuals and communities balance the need for economic development with environmental protection? And how can anthropological theory and method be applied to help communities find sustainable solutions to the problems they face? Much of my research has been based in Asia, especially China. However, the longer I'm in Oregon, the more I work on local issues too, including the human dimensions of forestry, agriculture, and fisheries.
In Asia and Africa, I focus on the interface of food traditions in production, procurement, consumption, food security, and change. The role of gathered plant foods in farm household well-being is a focus, as well as children's food production and procurement knowledge, particularly in the face of an absent parental generation. Cultural heritage is at risk as the parental generation is removed from rural communities in Asia and Africa due to migration or to death due to AIDS in particular. How best to support the continuity of cultural knowledge of children in traditional food production and procurement is a question currently being asked by FAO. Traditional knowledge and foodways are eroding at a very fast rate, in part due to the forces of globalization and the spread of a monetized global economy. Biocultural heritage and intangible cultural heritage are now firmly on the global agenda.
So I focus on community health workers in Africa and the social and emotional work that they put into global health interventions, focusing on HIV/AIDS, maternal and child health, polio eradication, you name it. I also examined the big global health institutions that rely on community health workers, the ministries of health, NGOs, their donors, and these fascinating negotiations that arise over community health worker job creation and remuneration. So ministries of health in Africa and their international donors want to spread access to basic health care to millions of people, but they face a fundamental problem, and that's recruiting frontline health workers and getting higher productivity out of them. So I help solve this problem by looking at how worker effectiveness depends on the quality of relationships with their patients and also with the institutions that rely on them.
I'm interested in how cultures are formed, and in particular how residual elements may offer emergent pathways. Language use and food practices have been my two windows into this complex subject. The uses of minority languages within multilingual repertoires and the various connections and disconnections within local and global food systems have focused my interest on the role of conscious choice and activism in promoting socially just communities. I'm currently involved in a multidisciplinary international research project exploring positive deviance in food production, water use, and nutritional practices in 3 communities in Ecuador. The focus of the project is not to bring in experts and resources from the outside, but to explore positive practices that already exist and can be expanded in a culturally sensitive way. The corporate control of the global food system has made the life of small farmers around the world untenable and has led to massive rural to urban migration and myriad nutritional problems. I would like my research and activism to assist those around the world who are working to reconnect consumers with the producers of their food. One major focus of my work is to assist OSU students to become global citizens who appreciate the myriad local manifestations of culture and have the tools to become active community members wherever they end up. In addition to engaging students in the world, my work supports the teaching and learning of multiple languages, especially those languages with no state support, and the shift from unconscious consumption to the understanding that we support specific economic systems, environmental pathways, and people's livelihoods with every meal that we eat.